All right, so welcome back to another episode of the Deals for Dentists podcast. Today we're joined to talk about credit card processing fees and consortium P cards. We're joined by Cheryl McKenna of Merchant Advocates from Erie, Colorado.
Yeah.
All right, and mention Deals for Dentists, and you can keep 100% of the savings they find in the first 2 months. So schedule your free consultation with Cheryl McKenna. We're also joined by Steve Pishko, the managing partner of United Purchasing Card Group, and he's zooming in from Orlando. And Steve, you also have a role with Merchant Advocates as well, correct?
I do. I work on both sides.
Okay, and for Steve's promo on Deals for Dentists, he's promoting his company's purchasing card or P card. You can get access to cash rebate levels normally made available only to large institutions. It's like a GPO for corporate credit cards. All right, so welcome aboard, and I think that this is actually a really going to be a great podcast because I feel like in dental offices that evaluating your credit card processing fees is such an important part of the dental practice or any business, and is often overlooked or forgotten about. We try so hard to reduce our costs and our overhead, and we search the web to try to find the latest deal on paper towels and patient bibs, and turn the thermostat down to save a buck. But I mean, this is just such a no-brainer to try to reduce your credit card processing fees. So Cheryl is going to tell us about that, and Steve's also going to tell us how we can actually make some money with some cash rebates. So me likey the cash rebate, so we'll get into that a little later. So I wanted to start with Cheryl, and I feel like I should have renamed this podcast Explain It to Me Like I'm 5, because a lot of the questions that I'm going to be asking you, I'm asking because either I don't know or I had to learn later in life. Because as a dentist, we go to school for at least 8 years after high school. We get so cooped up in our little bubble with studying, and you really don't know much about the outside business world, and they definitely don't teach you these things in dental school. So can you explain to the dentists out there what Merchant Advocates does and what your process is and how you help dentists?
Yeah, absolutely. So Merchant Advocate is unique because we are not a merchant service provider. Okay, and our goal is to save you money on your merchant services. So your patients pay with credit cards, and you have to contract with a company. You get the equipment, like the credit card terminals, what have you, and they charge you a fee. So they send you a statement every month. But our goal is to save you money on those rates and fees without switching processors. So we always say that we're processor agnostic. To us, it doesn't matter so much who you process with. What really matters is that you're receiving the lowest cost, that there aren't any hidden rates and fees, and that you have the best program possible for the practice.
Okay, so when you say the actual terminal or processing unit, the terminal is like when you go to catch a train somewhere, right? Like that's the terminal that you go to when you take a train ride. Is that right?
No, it's the credit card processing terminal that's at your practice, right? So your patient hands you a credit card to pay, and you take that card and you swipe it, or you tap it, or you chip it into that credit card terminal, right? And usually a receipt pops out. And it used to be that you'd need to get that receipt signed, and nowadays you don't always need to get that receipt signed, which is actually something we should talk about at least before we're done with this podcast, because that just helps minimize touches during COVID, right? Mm-hmm. But when the company that provides that equipment, they also send you every month a merchant statement. And most people look at that merchant statement and it might as well be written in Egyptian hieroglyphics. And if you don't know what every single line item means on that merchant statement, then you definitely need Merchant Advocate to look at that statement. Because what we find when we dive into those monthly statements from your processors is that 70% of dental practices are being overcharged. So they're paying too much to accept those patient credit card payments. And let's face it, for a majority of the dental practices, that's most of the revenue that comes into the practices, right? Is by patients paying with credit card. So why not pay less? That's money that's going to go right to your bottom line. It's pure profit, but it's an unregulated industry, and the statements are designed to be confusing. So those of you listening to the podcast, I would challenge you to go and find a statement as soon as you can and look at some of those line items and find one that says IRF, find one that says NABU, find one that says International Assessment or VSP Retail. Anyways, we know what all of those mean, and we know what the costs are, and we know if you're paying too much. And then you'd be amazed at how many completely made up fees there are on those statements as well. So it's really interesting for us to dive in and see how much the practice is overpaying. And then what we do is we take care of that and we save the practice money. That's the only way we get paid, actually. And one of the things I love about working with Merchant Advocate is that we're performance-based. We only get paid if we save a practice money. So
it's essentially risk-free. So, you know,
exactly.
If you're not saving the practice money, then you're not getting paid. So you're basically sitting on the same side of the table as the dentist. And so do you actually negotiate with the credit card companies to reduce these fees?
Yes, absolutely. So when we look at the statements, we're looking for math errors, like just overcharges, hidden rates and fees. So those are some of the things that we go to the merchant service providers to negotiate. But then the statement will also tell us some other things, like, is there a procedural error at the practice? Those folks who are processing patient credit card payments and they're integrated into their practice management software, right? So Dentrix or EagleSoft or Dolphin or DNS, whatever. There could be a communication error. We have found, especially with orthodontic practices, and we're in the middle of this big campaign to gather this data, but the practice management software and the merchant software, they're having a communication issue, right? And so it's causing the practice, through no fault of their own, to overpay for these certain types of Visa credit card payments, right? Well, the practice wouldn't know that by looking at that statement, but it's one of those line items that we look at Merchant Advocate and go, hey, wait a second, something's missing here. And then when we dive deeper into that, we figure out why and how it can be fixed.
And just kind of to add to that as well, you know, a lot of times we'll come across clients who say, you know, I have really great rates. You know, I've negotiated, I've brought down my rates. And as Cheryl just mentioned, the part that they're not looking at is the interchange side. That's the part that Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express is charging. The processor that the client has does not care if those interchange codes are correct, because they don't make anything out of that. That's a pass-through fee. So that's why Merchant Advocate is so important, because we're looking at both sides. We're looking at what the processor is charging, but we're also making sure that all those interchange codes are correct as well.
Yeah, so it just shows, like, what you just said, it's like you're speaking Korean to me. And so you need a professional company to come in and do this, because let's face it, insurance company and banking institutions, they're not looking out for the best interest of the small business. And now, did you say that this industry is unregulated, and has that changed at all during COVID?
No, it hasn't changed during COVID. So, I mean, there are a few regulations in place, but when a business owner signs a merchant agreement, part of the terms and conditions are that their rates can be raised at any time, and the acknowledgement that that's okay that their processor raise the rates is that they continue processing with that particular service provider. So there's not anywhere that even states that they are required to send you notification that your rates are increasing. Now, some of the processors do. They'll put a message down at the very end of your statement, which most people don't read, but they'll put a message down and they'll say, due to like changing interchange, you might notice some differences in your rates and fees starting with the October statement. Period. That's it.
That's it. And
okay, great. So then it would be up to the business owner to look at every single one of those line items, right? And a lot of cases do the math backwards and make sure that it's the same in September as it was in October, or what's different. That's not a dentist's lane, right? That their lane is oral health and taking care of their patients. So that's what we do. We look at those statements and we decipher everything and make sure we hold the processor's feet to the fire. And you were right when you said that we're on the same side of the table as the business owner, as the dentist. Yes, definitely.
And I think just to add to that is when they do make those changes or when they put those notices at the bottom of the statements, that is a great chance for the processor itself to then increase their rate. So maybe the Visa, MasterCard, they're raising rates, but then all of a sudden, hey, this is the processor can say, well, we can raise our rates at the same time. And then when there's questions later on, the processor can say, oh yeah, well, your rates went up because Visa raised their rates. We have nothing to do with that. It's smoke and mirrors all over the place on these statements.
So have you actually noticed that trend? Have they actually been raising rates during COVID and post-COVID?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
And actually, August was a particularly bad month for those increases. So one of the things that we do at Merchant Advocate, not only do we negotiate the rates and fees and we optimize the interchange, as Steve was mentioning, but we also audit our clients' statements every single month. And then once we find an increase, we have a team that deals with that. So they reach out to the processor, because maybe the rate did go up 0.1%. But the processor says, let's make that 0.5. So it'd be nice to have some extra profit, right, on the books. So we reach out to those processors. Well, I've gotten so many notifications that my clients' rates were increased in August. And it's the two of the biggest processors that are involved in the dental merchant services industry. So it's definitely affecting dentists.
And it's affecting the entire industry. I've gotten the same notices from, all of my Merchant Advocate clients. And here's the nice thing about what Merchant Advocate does. When we get those audits done, our team is automatically going back in and just renegotiating or just, making adjustments back to, when we first made the adjustments. So there's no additional cost or anything to that. That's part of our job, is to make sure that we're driving the cost down to as little as possible.
So what's Steve and Cheryl, what's your process? How do you actually negotiate with the credit card companies and the processing fees? How do you actually do that?
Well, obviously the business owner, the client has to give us permissions. They have to authorize us to reach out to their processor, right? And it really depends on the processor. So some of the processors will allow us to just call them up and be like, hey, we're working with such and such company. Some of the processors will require that the business sends an email from their email address authorizing us, right? But basically, it's designed to take as little of the business owner's time as possible, right? So we only get the business involved for a short amount of time just to authorize us. And then it's really what that particular service needs when it comes to an adjustment, right? So maybe it's just rates and fees, or maybe I've been on phone with processors and with software providers saying, look, you guys, there's a programming error here, right? So it depends on what we find in those statements when we really take that deep dive as to how we need to tackle that individual business. So I always say that each business, their merchant services is like a puzzle, and everyone's got a unique puzzle. So yeah, we ultimately always have to get in touch with the processor, but how that looks is dependent upon what we find on the merchant statement.
Now, do these fees range from state to state, from urban to rural to suburban? How does that work?
No, the fees don't change. I mean, maybe the types of cards that the specific practice is accepting, right? So maybe if they're in a more urban or affluent area, they might take maybe some higher level rewards cards versus a more rural area, maybe where they have a lower average ticket, maybe they're accepting more debit cards. But no, I wouldn't say there's any difference. Would you, Steve?
No, the only difference you maybe will see is if when the account is set up, if the account is not set up properly with the proper SIC codes, but that really doesn't have anything to do with, where you're located. So I would agree with Cheryl on that.
And what's your success rate typically when you go in? Are you finding when you go in and you analyze each practice that you're able to find some leftover profits there and negotiate fees pretty successfully?
Yeah, so I would say that in my industry, which is primarily dental, and then I'll let Steve answer that for the industry that he focuses on, but I would say approximately 70% of the dental practices that we review are being overcharged. And of those, we have an 85% success rate in negotiating lower rates and fees. The 15% is generally that the processor, for whatever reason, just digs their heels in. And I had a couple of those this summer. And gosh, the negotiations took so long. And finally, the processor said, no, we're not going to change anything. So the doctor said, well, both these doctors said, well, then we're going to change processors. So we do have preferred providers that we have vetted, that we work with, that will give great rates and fees, not lock our clients into a contract, those types of things. So in these two particular examples, both dentists chose to change providers because once they realized that they were overpaying and then their processor refused to do anything about it, all they had to do was lower the cost to something that was fair, and they would have been able to keep that business, but they didn't, so that business went away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just I'll jump on Cheryl's coattails on that. I would say those percentages are about the same in my area, which I focus specifically in healthcare. Orthopedics, ophthalmology. Those are my two highest areas. But one of the things I wanted to mention was even when we look at someone's statements and there is no savings, there's a couple of really nice things that happen after that. Number one, we've just provided third-party confirmation that your program is great. You don't need to do anything to it. But here's the thing, let's do a checkup. I mean, you do that with your patients, don't you, Eric? I mean, hey, your teeth look great, but hey, come back in 6 months because you don't ever know when something's going to change or going to pop up. Same thing with this. Your rates, everything could be great, but who knows what's going to change? In this industry, what a lot of processors do, they accumulate volume and then they sell their portfolio. And so when they sell that portfolio, then that new processor may have a whole new way of doing things. So it's very, very important to then even keep in touch and share your statements every, 6 to 9 months, just to do a quick checkup. There's no effort on the client's part. They're just sending statements. We're providing some feedback.
So this isn't a one and done thing. You have to keep doing your, like you said, your checkups and keep evaluating. It's just so shocking that these companies, businesses are struggling and, they're raising their fees. What a surprise that the credit card companies and banking institutions are actually in it to just make money. Yeah, it's unbelievable. So now what's the trend with are you finding that most offices are going to like a touchless system where they don't actually have the terminals in the office? Are they doing like in our office we're holding credit cards on file to try to create like a touchless front desk so the patient handles all their finances either before or after the visit, so they're not actually handing the credit card to the front desk. Are you finding many offices are doing this?
Yeah, we are. And it's interesting because we have added to, so our clients every month get a monthly analysis report, right? And it just tells them, hey, here's the savings that Merchant Advocate has found for you. And it also allows us to put some, communication down there. So one of the things that's coming up is there's going to be a very large increase on certain types of Visa hand-entered credit cards. So keeping the card on file absolutely has its place. There are definitely times when you should do that. I really advocate for it. If a patient is in your practice and they have a credit card with them, there are ways that you can keep the team safe and you can keep the patient safe, but you can still have what's called a card present sale, okay, which is that the card is shipped, it's tapped, there's Apple Pay, there's Google Pay, the magnetic strip is swiped. So it is difficult for some practices, like how they're routing patients through, but the technology is available nowadays that every processor that I'm aware of, except for one that's integrated into a few different types of dental practice management softwares, has the capability for touchless credit card payments, right? So when you look at your credit cards in your wallet, you'll see the NFC, like it looks like a sound wave, right? Mm-hmm. So that's definitely something that I talk to clients about on a one-on-one basis, because again, it's like a puzzle. So each practice is routing patients in differently. Each practice has a different piece of equipment. Each practice has different practice management software. And then if you do need to stay completely contactless, we just need to make sure that you're handling those hand-entered credit cards correctly. So the moral of the story is that Eric, you should definitely have your office manager reach out to me.
You got it. I will. Is the days of the signature on the receipt, is that going to be a way of the past? Where you mentioned that you actually don't need a signature anymore, and
as long as you are Apple Pay, Google Pay, Tap to Pay, or chip. So the card brands, which is Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, have deemed that if you process a sale in one of those ways, you no longer need a signature on a receipt. And so that can minimize touch, right? And then if you have the correct equipment where the team's the only people that are handling the merchant credit card terminal, and the patient's the only one that's handling their credit card. Because think about it, they could chip their card, they could tap it, they could do Apple Pay, they could do Google Pay. They don't have to touch the credit card terminal. They just need to use their credit card, and then the team can do the rest of the functions, like entering in the dollar amount, whatever,
So if it's still the old-fashioned swipe, then you still need the signature?
Correct.
Okay.
So the magnetic strip requires signature.
Okay.
Or hand entered, obviously, but you wouldn't normally have a person there then, but yeah.
Yeah, I was just at the post office the other day, and I looked at the touchpad, and I didn't want to touch it. It was gross. The numbers were all worn down. I don't know how many people have been there and touched that. So I'd so much rather the tap, or even over the chip. I'd rather just tap it and not have to touch anything. I think COVID's made us all germaphobes. So, what about QR readers? Is that going to be a way of the future, where you can just kind of hold your phone over, and you don't actually even have to even?
I think so, yeah. And I think because of the technology's there and it's been there for a while, but the COVID environment is just driving for faster adoption for sure.
Okay. And I also wanted to ask you about as far as safety and the security, the swipe versus the tap or the QR. What's the safest way for your office to either accept credit cards or for patients to use a credit card? Is there a difference in safety?
Well, pretty much any piece of equipment that is capable of accepting a chip card or tap to pay has what's called point-to-point end encryption, which means that the full credit card number is never transmitted across the business's network or internet connection, right? Or telephone line, but those are really going away. Telephone line terminals. So basically it's tokenized. So think of it like the credit card number is scrambled, and the only way to unscramble it is when it gets to the other side at the merchant provider who has the key to unscramble that token. So yeah, they're safe.
Okay. And I always feel like I have to ask two follow-up questions. One, how are things, post-COVID? And two, how do things compare with a DSO? Do you notice like a large DSO can negotiate better rates than the solo practitioner, owner-operator practice?
Well, I mean, obviously there's a volume component to the types of rates that we are able to achieve on clients' behalf, but it's not as much of a factor as many would think that it is. And what we find with a lot of the DSOs and the larger practices, say, multi-locations, maybe between like 3 and up, is that they might have great rates to begin with, but we're seeing a lot of errors. We're seeing a lot of interchange optimization opportunities. So yeah, it's always good for us to take a deep dive into those statements and see what we can find. And of course, there's no cost and no obligation for that.
And you also said that
maybe just to add to that as well, those DSOs that are negotiating or help negotiating those rates, who knows, after 6 months to a year, the processor behind the scene is raising rates on them. They don't even know that. So
right.
The DSOs aren't, they're not experts as well. They're just using obviously their buying power to try to leverage. But honestly, that we didn't really get into it, but the Merchant Advocate was started on that backbone. The owner of Merchant Advocate, Eric Cohen, used to own a processing company, and he became so fed up with the unethical practices behind the scenes that's why he started this company.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Steve, I started off with Cheryl and saying how you need to explain these things to me like I'm 5, but in your case, you need to explain it to me like I'm 3. What the H is a P card, and is that different than my son's in kindergarten? They have a P card, but I think that's for something different. That's for when they need to use the restroom. But please explain to me what a P card is.
Sure. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because about 5 years ago, I was sitting in a bank's office, and I used to deal in the commercial financing, world. And a banker said to me after they found out that I had all these healthcare clients, and they said, "Have you ever thought about starting a P card consortium?" And I looked at him, my eyes were crossed. I said, "I don't even know what a P card is."
Yeah.
And I love that idea. Maybe your son does. But honestly, in the simplest terms, all a P card is a purchasing card. Okay. It's a credit card on steroids. Okay. It's kind of a mix between a credit card and a line of credit, if you want to put it for a business. Okay, so it's really designed to kind of take advantage of the existing credit card infrastructure to make electronic payments, a little bit easier, for all goods and services, not just for, giving the office assistant, here, take my card, go pick up some paper, toilet paper. Okay. A lot of these healthcare providers, they're buying from major vendors like Henry Schein or McKesson or whoever out there. Well, those vendors accept credit card. Okay. So they want to get payment quicker, and why not get a rebate off of it? So that's what this is designed for, is to take advantage of that. So I hope it's really the simplest terms of what a P card is. It's a purchasing card. And if it's kind of funny, this is where I see both sides of it on the merchant processing. If you were to look at your statement, or when we look at your statement, if there's insurance companies out there remitting payment via credit card, they're making a rebate off of the practice. Okay, and those are actually more expensive cards because they're getting a nice rebate off of it. So does that help?
Yeah. So Steve, can you actually set limits and controls with these P cards? For example, we have a few different staff members that pay the accounts payable.
Absolutely. There's a management system behind it that what you want to call the super user, who would be maybe your office manager or yourself, would have control over, how many cards, actual physical cards you want issued, what the limits are on them, merchant categories. If you had, this really has more to do with like sales teams and stuff. If you had them, I don't think you would be dealing with that, but you don't want them, spending at, buying alcohol or going to the local, whatever, rec center or something, spending, so you can actually control merchant categories and put restrictions on the card. So honestly, I think you have more control on a purchasing card than you actually have on, if you just gave your card to the office assistant and said, hey, go buy a few things. And then the other nice thing is you can actually create single use cards. So if you wanted to set up a program where every month you're paying a specific amount to a vendor, you can actually set up that when that payment, or you're sending a virtual card to the vendor, it can only be run for that specific amount or less. So if they put 1 penny more, then the card would get declined, it wouldn't go through. So there's a huge amount of controls on the purchasing card programs. It's really set up obviously for the commercial user in that way.
So could this actually prevent some embezzlement and some extracurricular activities going on with these credit cards? Because like me, I just like, here you go, hand my assistant the card, and off they go.
Yeah, once again, the management system behind the scenes is, you have total control, and it's more secure than that type of use. You could actually assign a specific card, and you can order as many cards as you want. You could have one, or you could have 50. There's no cost to the program. That's the nice thing too. So your office assistant or whoever can actually have their own card, and then you can actually set limits on it. So number one, you could say, hey, look, on my office assistant, I know, that person shouldn't be spending more than $500 a time when they're going out. And so you could actually put a limit that way. Once again, there's the merchant categories and a lot of other restrictions. So, embezzlement is going to be very, very difficult for somebody on a program like this, because you're viewing those transactions very easily on a management system behind the scenes.
Are these actual physical cards we're talking about, or is this more of like a digital world where with an app or a portal?
It's actually both. So, a purchasing card program is either going to have physical cards, or you're going to have what's called ghost cards, which are one-time use type cards. So as I was mentioning just a minute ago, if you want a specific dollar amount of a transaction, you can program it that way. So it does, So part of the AP side, so once you get things, and this is what our team does behind the scenes, once you have, say, 20 vendors that accept payment and everything is set up in the system, the invoices are hitting the system, you're looking at the management side and you're approving the invoices digitally, saying, yes, okay, let's go ahead and pay it. That actually gets sent to the issuer of the card. So whoever, what I have multiple programs that I work through, and they're actually sending payment over to the vendor, who then will get a one-time use card. And it's the same way the insurance companies are typically remitting payment. So I don't know if some of your members out there see insurance remittances, but they usually will get them in a one-time use card. So in that aspect, it is a virtual world. And so it's very similar, as Cheryl was mentioning, when that card is going to the system, it's all tokenized, it's very secure. So there's no one's going to catch that card and use it for something else. So it's the virtual world, honestly, is more secure than the physical credit card.
It also sounds like with the virtual world, you're able to track these purchases and kind of reconcile everything to make sure all the numbers add up, compared to if you're using some checks, some credit cards. So it sounds like it's very trackable, kind of streamlines everything. Is that right?
Absolutely. That's the beauty of the management. It's actually a great cash management system. You can use it for the credit card purchases. You can use it for ACH and any if there's any cash transactions. It all can actually go into the same system.
Now, so you can actually get cash rebates. So I can get like a credit card. One of the reasons I developed Deals for Dentists, because I really liked the layout and the behind the credit card comparison sites, because I was searching for a cash rebate card, because me likey the cashy. So, and I don't travel anymore because of I have little kids and because of COVID. So I'm not interested in travel rewards cards. So I prefer a cash rebate, and cash is king. So are these how does it work with the cash rebates? Do you get like a credit with the vendor, or do you actually get a check in the mail? How does that work?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I have a couple of different programs. So one of the things that United Purchasing Card Group has done is if you look at my company more as a buying group for commercial cards. So I've done the heavy lifting on going out to multiple institutions out there to see who's providing the best deals. And then I said, look, I have a large group that I would like to bring. And so we want to do is want to do an economy of scales here. And so, as you mentioned in the very beginning, what I'm bringing to the table with these rebates is a higher rebate that your dentists are probably going to get as a one-off, going actually to the same institutions that I actually work with. So to answer your questions on the cash rebates, either you can take cash, or some of the programs will actually do a credit to the account. So you can use that credit to just pay your balance off. But it's either way, it's the same. And one of the things I want to mention, because you're mentioning the travel perks, American Express is a very, very popular program out there. And, they have a lot of great tools. I don't want to put that down, because there are a lot of clients that I've used out there that haven't. I've looked at those programs. If they're using it for travel, it actually is, American Express is a very good program. But what I found are so many users of Amex are just taking points and then converting those points into, say, like a debit or a gift card, or to buy Christmas gifts or holiday gifts at the end of the year. Those are the worst ways to use your points, because you're actually getting probably 70, 80 cents on the dollar there. Where my program would have done is it's a cash rebate of 1.5% up to 2% in some cases. I don't want to get into the weeds here with all the terms, but we can probably get up to 2% on some cases. So the Amex, and here's the other thing with Amex, as you know, a lot of vendors may not take Amex. I mean, I'm sure you've walked into stores where, a store said, you hand out your Amex and they're like, oh, sorry, we don't take that. So I actually have some clients that have dual programs. They still use their Amex because they like to get those travel rewards, and I don't blame them. They're actually great rewards. But then they use my program to also to use the card for the vendors that don't take Amex. And so, it's just as Cheryl mentioned on the merchant advocate side, there's no one size fits all. Everybody kind of has a different way to use this program. There's, with a purchasing card, there's payment terms. It could be from a week where you have to pay the card off or over a month. So, it just kind of depends on what program fits for the client.
I was going to ask you how the rate for the rebates works, and like I was asking Cheryl, does it depend on if I'm a solo practitioner versus a DSO? Would a DSO get a better rate, or is that really kind of the purpose behind this? Is that it's a power in numbers, and you're getting a better rate with a P card than you would if I was just to get a regular cash rewards card?
Well, I mean, as a solo practitioner, you could go to your local bank. They probably offer some kind of purchasing card program. It's a common program. It's not done anything that's new. That I've done is I've used volume and I've scaled the numbers to allow a smaller program that might be only doing, in a year's time, spending $500 to $1 million a year, to get the same level rebates that, say, a hospital system is getting that's doing $100 million a year. So that's the difference. It's not, the program may be similar, even though I've looked at a lot of them, and I feel like our program provides a lot of other efficiencies, like a lot of this management system behind the scene. There's no cost to it, and there's no cost to the program. Where also there are institutions out there where you may be able to get, maybe a fairly high rebate, but that bank is going to require you to move all your banking business, over to that bank. And no one wants to go through that hassle. So these programs don't require that at all. It's strictly on the purchasing card side.
Now, for both of you, when is a good time for a dental office to reach out to you? Is it when they're first opening their practice? If someone's starting from scratch, before they open their practice, for a new business owner, or someone who's my practice has been around since 1974, so it's been around for a long time. I haven't been there that long, but
I was gonna say, I don't. Are you sure?
But
didn't you say you have young children?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So the Doogie Hazard of dentists.
That's right. So when would it be a good time for a dentist to reach out to you, or is there never a bad time?
There's never a bad time, for sure.
On the purchasing card side, now this is where it's a little bit different than the merchant processing side. There is an underwriting component to this, because if you think about it, the institution is providing this credit card, purchasing card is providing a line of credit. So, so normally if it was an office that had no history, it may be a little hard to get a purchasing card that has, let's say, a 30-day float, which all that means is you have 30 days to pay it off. Okay, so there's no carrying interest rate on these programs. You have to pay it off within that time frame. So what we do for programs like that also want to get a cash rebate, we could set up, it's basically like a same day payoff. So there's a connection to a bank account that you use the card, you're getting cash rebates, but that institution is drawing the payment almost immediately. So that would be a good setup for a new business. Now, if you have history, you're not going to have any problem. One of the things we do is we get your AP list, your accounts payable, a yearly list, figure out, what is your monthly volume on your payments, or what we think we could get on the card. And then we give you that limit based on that.
Okay. Yeah, I think both of your situations are such a no-brainer, especially nowadays during the times of COVID. Like in my office, our wages are the same, our overhead is up, our production is down because of capacity, and why overpay for merchant for credit card processing fees, and why get underpaid for rebates? So I think this is such a no-brainer. Especially now, we have to be so careful of our overhead and our expenses, and we need to be as efficient and productive as possible, now more than ever. So I want to thank both of you so much for joining me. Again, this is Cheryl McKenna from Merchant Advocates. If you go to Deals for Dentists, you mention Deals for Dentists, you keep 100% of the savings that they have defined in the first 2 months. You schedule your free consultation with Cheryl and Steve Pishko, managing partner of United Purchasing Card Group. Go to Deals for Dentists and click on his call to action button. You can find out how to get access to cash rebate levels normally made available only for large institutions. It's like a GPO for corporate credit cards. Again, thanks so much. Either of you have any last nuggets for the dentists out there? Any last words of wisdom?
I think the last thing that I'd like to mention is where the no-brainer comes in is, even if you don't move forward with us, why not look at it? You may have a great credit card rebate program in place, or you may have great processing, in place, but how do you really know? So that would be my last nugget.
Yeah, and I would just second exactly what Steve said. I mean, and what you said too, Eric. I mean, capacity's down, overhead is up, wages are the same. So it's great to have these tools to find some more profit, to add more profitability back in the practice. It's never a better time than now, right?
That's it. Agreed so much. And let's be in touch and maybe get back together in the next 6 months or year and find out what's going on and what the trends are in both of your worlds. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Right,
thank you very much, Eric, for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll be in touch. Take care.
All right. Take care, everyone.